was today's? No. Where'd you go? Come on, come on, come on. All right, the entries have slowed down, so let's get going. I think that I've got this sharing not quite right here, so whoops. So let's go through yesterday's quiz real quickly. Number one, people can get liver flukes from eating infected and undercooked fish. Idiots. That should have been simple enough. Number two, lampreys are a type of jawless fish. Doesn't mean they don't have a mouth, remember, just they don't have a jaw that opens and shuts. Number three, ascarids. Second, ascarids are kind of roundworm. Remember, roundworms are not earthworms. Earthworms are segmented, roundworms are not. Sponges use tentacles to sweep food into their mouth. No, they have cavities, little cavities that they use, that they make the water flow through with flagella. Plants need phosphorus to make nucleic acids like DNA and RNA. Horsetails have vascular tissue but no seeds. Same would be true of ferns, but ferns wasn't a choice there. And that is those are the answers to that quiz. All right, I want to look at a few categories of animals, just some of the main things about them. And then we'll let you do today's quiz. There was something about today's quiz. Number 6, I think it is, on today's quiz. The answer was on these handwritten cards that I've been using, but the answer was not on CRAM, nor probably in your book to number 6. So number 6 will just be, okay, it'll just be free now. The online grading doesn't know that it's supposed to give you automatic credit for it. So I will have to go through later and take care of that. But don't get excited if you can't find the answer. The answer is there, you just don't know what it is. And I don't know about today, but yesterday, probably about somewhere in the 3 o'clock range, LMS was really getting bogged down with probably almost literally everybody in the world using it. So the sooner you take that online quiz, if you have not already, the happier you will be. Also, for future reference, you will not need it until this Friday. But I have, that's not the right one. This is the right one. I have shared the I have shared the biology inbox with all of you specifically, not just sent you a link, but told Google to accept your email address. So that means I think it's under shared drives, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't have any real good way to check. Either under shared drives or shared with me in your Google Drive, you should easily be able to find the biology inbox. Friday, you will need that for the worksheet you're going to have on Friday. And then, by the way, next week, I'm not exactly sure how it works yet, but next week will be coming up on test time early next week. All right. So the vertebrate animals. Not going to tell you anything else about the jawless fish. I already said everything I'm going to say when I showed you a picture of a lamprey. Cartilaginous fish. They're called cartilaginous, or some of you might have said cartilage in us, which maybe is a good way to remember because these fish have cartilage in them. Okay, you have a little cartilage like your ears and nose, but the cartilaginous fish are all cartilage. They do not have bone in their skeleton. Their skeleton is all cartilage. They breathe by gills. Many of them have what they call ram circulation, as in they cannot stop swimming. They cannot pump the water over their gills when they're standing still, so they have to keep swimming along to ram the water through their gills. But they breathe by gills. Cartilaginous fish, interesting fact, they have multiple rows of teeth. New smaller teeth are constantly growing in on the inner edge of those rows of teeth and moving outward as the old teeth are lost. Another interesting thing about cartilaginous fish is their reproduction. I didn't put this here because it's too mix and match. But several categories of cartilaginous fish actually have a placenta-like structure and actually have give birth to live young, and that's kind of a issue, or it used to be an issue for the evolutionists to say, whoa, you know, how did this happen? It evolved twice. Well, now the evolutionists are just like, wow, this is amazing. They shouldn't have this placenta-like structure, but they do. Isn't evolution amazing? So, yeah, they're starting to sound about evolution almost like we sound about God, and that's my opinion. A little bit idolatrous. I don't know how to say that. All right, the bony fish. Bony fish are what we think of when we think of fish: trout, perch, salmon. I guess I already said trout, didn't I? Salmon, bluegills, all of the normal fish that we think of are bony fish. They're bony fish because their skeleton is made of bone, not cartilage. Their body is covered by scales. If you've ever caught a fish and had to clean it, you know it's covered with all those scales. They have an air bladder, or sometimes called a swim bladder. I should write that down. It is sometimes called a swim bladder. Now, what good is an air bladder? And by the way, if you've been fishing and cleaned fish, even the small fish, it's easy to see this air bladder. So you catch fish, you slice open its belly, you strip out all the internal organs, cut its head off somewhere along the way. But after you slit open its belly and clean out all the internal organs, there's this smooth layer of tissue. And if you break through that smooth layer of tissue, there is nothing above it except just this space. And then above the space is the muscle of their back. If you've ever noticed that, you have noticed the swim bladder or the air bladder. These swim bladders are so that the fish can maintain a certain depth. If you've ever watched fish in an aquarium or wherever else you might have seen them, they can stay at a specific depth in the water without having to swim. Now, if you swim and you dive down under the water and you stop swimming, you either slowly float to the top, likely, or possibly, if you're muscly enough, a little enough body fat, you might slowly sink to the bottom. But if you stop moving, you don't stay in one depth. You either float or you sink. Sorry about that. Fish can just stand there, just sit there, just whatever, float there. You watch this fish, it's just sitting at a certain level in the aquarium. It may occasionally, if it feels like it, slowly go deeper without really swimming forward, or it may go slightly higher without really swimming forward or backward. And that's because of the air bladder. What the air bladder can do is it can absorb nitrogen, I suppose, but it can absorb gases from the blood and swell up to make the fish just a smidgen lighter so that it floats higher in the water, or it can remove air back to the blood and then out through the gills from the air bladder to make the air bladder ever so slightly smaller so that it is a little more dense and sinks a little deeper in the water. These do have respiration by gills, as you have undoubtedly noticed. Bony fish are somewhat different than some of the cartilaginous fish. They have the opercula or gill cover, the little flaps on the side of their face. And if you've ever watched a fish closely, when the mouth is open, the flaps, the opercula on the side of its head are closed. And when the mouth is closed, the opercula is open so that they are able to pump water over their gills as they sit in one place because of the air bladder. So this means that they don't have to keep constantly moving like some of the sharks and so on do in order to breathe. Bony fish can be either oviparous or, here you go, and the prize for the most V's in one word goes to ovoviviparous. Now, you don't know what those terms are, so I'm going to flip ahead a few cards here and look at those three terms, types or categories of animal reproduction. There is three of them, as I said: oviparous, ovoviviparous, and viviparous. So the word parous means, the root parous means to give birth. You might, especially if you have a parent in the medical profession, you might know that a medical term for giving birth is parturition. Probably don't, but you might. You good chance have heard of postpartum depression, when mothers go through a period of a little bit of depression after they give birth. So postpartum, the partum is the same root as parous. Parous means to give birth. So ova refers to an egg. So this means literally egg birth, not Egbert, egg birth. If you took Spanish, and I'll probably say this wrong for the Spanish pronunciation, but if you've taken Spanish or French or most of the, I don't know if those languages would be based primarily off Greek or Latin, but most of the languages based off Greek or Latin have a verb, vive, or we, and we, let's see, the English word where we commonly use this would be the word vivacious. You know, we say a person is vivacious, lively, and full of life. So the vivi or viva is life, you know, vive la France, long live France. So that is literally live birth. I'm sorry, it was something. My computer just randomly talked to me. Oh, so that means literally live birth. So you put them together, ovo, egg, viva, live, Paris, birth. So those kind of sound a little bit confusing. So here's how it works out. In both oviparous and ovoviviparous, there is an egg. Now, you're going to say, well, people have eggs too. Technically, no. People have ova, which is plural. Ovum is singular. And we commonly say, well, that's just another word for an egg. But it isn't. There is a pretty significant difference between ovum and ova and eggs. There's this technique that I've had done with a couple of my cows where they hyperovulate. I give shots to the cows to hyperovulate, and then I go to a, believe it or not, a cow reproductive center, and they collect the quote unquote eggs from the ovaries, and then they can fertilize those eggs in a petri dish and freeze the embryos for later. It's called IVF, or in vitro fertilization. But they never say egg. They always say oocyte, or site meaning cell. So that's, I guess, I'm sorry, I'm going on, and all that's just because ova are not eggs. Technically, we use the term, but they're not. So oviparous and ovoviviparous have an egg. What's the difference? In oviparous, now listen carefully, because there is a difference. And if you're not listening, it sounds like the same thing. In oviparous, the young develop in the egg outside of the mother's body. And what makes the egg different? They're nourished by the yolk. In ovoviviparous, the young develop in the egg inside the mother's body. Well, that's what's the difference between that and people? They're nourished by the yolk. So chickens lay eggs. You're all familiar with chickens. Many of you have seen chicken eggs hatched. It takes 21 days, maybe a little less if the temperature is a smidgen high, maybe a little more if the temperature is a smidgen low. But if you have the incubator set at exactly the right temperature, it takes 21 days to hatch eggs. 21 days for the embryo to go from invisible to a live chick in the egg, feeding on the yolk. Now let's say something like garter snakes. A lot of people say garden snakes, but it's garter snake. They give live birth, but they still have the eggs. They just don't lay them. They carry them around in their body until they hatch. The young is still developing inside an egg with a shell. In that case, it's a leathery shell. It's not a, because reptiles have leathery shell, not a hard shell. but it's carried around inside the mother. It hatches inside the mother's body when I don't know how many days it is for garter snakes, but when it's up, they hatch. And then when they're given birth, they hatch inside the mother's body and are pushed or whatever out. So that's why it's egg live birth, because they're still in an egg, but they don't come out until the egg hatches. Viviparous, the young develop in the womb, which is inside the mother's body. Now, they're not nourished by a yolk, they're nourished by the placenta. Placenta organ where mother and baby's tissue mingle, and the mother's blood and the baby's blood are in close proximity, but they don't mix, and so that nutrients and waste can pass back and forth. All right, so anyway, that takes us back to bony fish, which are oviparous. Some of them lay eggs, like let's say salmon, or ovoviviparous, which have live young. Eggs develop in the mother's body, like let's say guppies. If you ever had a guppy, you may have seen them lay eggs. I mean, well, they lay their eggs, and before the eggs have dropped an inch or two out of the mother's body, they hatch. Amphibians like frogs, toads, and salamanders are covered by usually a moist skin. The exception to that would be the toads. Stub my big toad. They breathe by gills when they're immature, in other words, as a tadpole, and they breathe by lungs and through their skin when they are mature. Maybe in the summertime, hot summertime, you've seen a dead frog on the road. Not run over, just dead. Sometimes frogs do that if they get trapped out of water for long enough, like they're on a dry road, it's cool and moist in the morning, and as they're moving along, sun beats and it gets hot and their skin starts to dry out and they literally suffocate because they cannot get enough oxygen just through their lungs. They have to get it through the lungs and the skin. Amphibians are oviparous. Notice that their eggs are laid in water. This is a big deal to the evolutionist because in order for life on land to evolve, according to the evolutionists, two things had to happen. First of all, animals had to learn how to breathe air, or accidentally develop the ability to breathe air. And secondly, they had to be able to lay eggs on dry land. According to the evolutionist, if they had never evolved the ability to lay eggs on dry land, all land animals would still have to lay eggs in the water, and everything would have to live next to a pond, lake, ocean, stream, whatever. So to the evolutionists, it's a big deal that they can only lay their eggs in the water. Reptiles, their body is covered with scales. They breathe air with lungs, but not so much through the skin. They're oviparous. Like, let's say, maybe you've seen a turtle lay eggs in your near your driveway, happens occasionally, or ovoviviparous, like what did I say earlier, garter snakes. But the big deal here is they have eggs that they, remember what I said about next to your driveway? Your driveway is not in a lake, at least not normally. So these have eggs that are not laid in the water. And this is a big deal. This is, to the evolutionist, a huge, huge step, the amniotic egg. Amniotic egg has a layer of membranes on the inside and a shell to keep it from drying out, which is the big, big deal to the evolutionists. All right. We're going to save birds and mammals for tomorrow. And that was all I was going to say for today. So if you have any questions, now's a good time to ask. Otherwise, make sure that quiz gets finished and don't wait too long. You've had all day, so if you wait till the last minute and the LMS isn't functioning, it's not really an excuse. All right, have a good day. Look for you tomorrow.